Look, from the chair, I hope that we don't inconvenience anybody, whether they're here currently or on YouTube.
But we're doing the public forum first. Yeah?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, that is okay.
Okay. Right, moving on to the public forum, we've got Richard Robson, who is requested to speak about water quality in local streams. Welcome, Richard. If you'd just like to grab a seat down the other end of the table, thank you. The microphone is voice activated and it's on, so...
Wonderful, thank you very much. Thank you for letting me have this opportunity to speak to the council.
Thank you.
I'd like to have the council hear my concerns primarily in regard to the Kaikorai stream, but the information I'm going to discuss in this is applicable to the Tomahawk Coastal Lagoon and other streams throughout Otago. First and foremost, I'm a father of 2 boys. My boys and I are all fishermen, and therefore we have an intense connection to our waterways and their surrounding environs. We have an innate obligation to protect them. As fishermen, we are the eyes and ears on our waterways. Often I refer to myself as a bit of a litmus test to see how they're doing. Unfortunately, we tend to treat our waterways and that creatures and the flora and fauna within them as that litmus paper, unfortunately. On the 21st of February, my son and I reported a major fish kill in the Kaikorai Estuary Lagoon in Waldronville. This was not the first. We reported this to Otago Fish and Game, who notified me that it was being reported to the ORC. The ORC conducted an investigation and subsequently engaged Ryder Enviro to follow up ORC investigation findings. Ryder Enviro's report found the water quality terribly degraded. Sadly, some say that that's not at all surprising, considering it's an urban stream. Shouldn't be that way, though. The problem is that as a community, do we care enough to put in place reforms to prevent it from continuing to degrade? Or do we just try and fix it when it gets so bad that it kills all forms of life? What's our goal as a council? I do not believe the ORC currently have an effective, proactive management plan to prevent degradation of water quality in the Kaikorai stream, and any other for that matter. Nor do they have any efficient plan to manage the opening of the coastal lagoon prior to the environment becoming too anoxic for aquatic flora and fauna to survive en masse. There are some good recommendations that came from the Ryder Enviro investigation on this, but they do not stretch to requesting ongoing monitoring and analysis of water quality at the lagoon itself. There is testing by the ORC upstream, but they're not testing the basin, down the bottom where the problem really manifests itself. The recommendations are wonderful, but these are recommendations, right? Is the ORC actually going to take heed of them? I hope so. I really do. Even if you do take heed, the recommended actions will continue to be reactive rather than proactive. That's my big concern here. Let's put this into perspective. No testing of the lagoon was done prior to the opening of the mouth recently, which happened to coincide with the fish kill. The ORC and the Ryder test showed results post the saline influx of water from the ocean into the lagoon down at Waldronville. So the test results they took are of water quality which is much better than what it was prior to the opening of the lagoon. Imagine what it was like when all those fish and all those plants died. It was a cesspit. The continued train of thought that the opening and subsequent influx of salt water from the opening was the primary culprit, that's not correct on this occasion, in my belief. It can play a role if a significant influx of seawater comes in. That can definitely cause problems in a coastal lagoon. But it was opened at a time of minimal surge. There was very little surf at that time, and the tides were insignificant. So the influx didn't cause the problem. There was no stratification of fresh and salt water as a result, because that's what can happen. You get a big influx of salt, you've got salt and fresh. and that causes big problems. Wasn't a problem this time. There was also a continued train of thought that high daytime temperatures caused this fish kill. NIWA discounted that. There wasn't any significant increase in temperatures. This occurred due to poor water quality that flows into that lagoon. Simple as that. Some of the reports, which, funnily enough, coincide with what's on the agenda today. You've got the SOE water quality report coming in today on the agenda. So some of the things that are written in there are quite damning. It's hideous. There's levels. You've got A, B, and C as your criteria. What does it meet? Is it good? Is it medium? Is it bad? Kaikorai Stream, off the scales, down low. Not good, right? So in simple terms, this fish kill, and I'll say it's not the first, was due to low oxygen levels caused by how we treat our fresh water. The lack of concern and protective measures of the ORC and the DCC. The DCC, when you talk to councils, you talk to people in councils, there's often a bit of, oh, that's their responsibility, or this is their responsibility. This has to be our responsibility. The DCC is responsible for all the inflow into that catchment. Yet the ORC are the people responsible for managing that stream itself. So it's quite confusing for a layman like me to work out where things lie. Luckily, Aaron Hawkins has been very gracious in getting some information to me, which proves that really the DCC takes a big part in this as well.
Richard, I might just get to wrap up.
Wrapping
please.
up right now, thank you. So we want these fragile ecosystems protected, not just fixed, right? We want ongoing water quality measurement of the lagoon itself, not just upstream. Can't be up there, it's got to be down right at the bottom end as well. We want effective procedures in place to prevent the introduction of contaminants, nitrates, toxins from both the ORC and DCC. We want an effective, proactive approach to the opening of the mouth of the estuary, not just wait till it's full up and let it out. I would like to see the recommendations provided by RIDA to the ORC taken on board. Otherwise, this engagement of an outside agency is nothing more than a show to placate the public.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Richard.
And just one final word. Te mana atoai. We all must protect our waterways. My child's here because he was there that day and he wanted to take part in this. So I think it's very significant that the generations below us are taking an interest in what we do.
No, very, very good, Richard.
Thank you very much for hearing me.
No, before you go, there may be a question or two, just to stay put. Just in general
Terrible
terms.
notes, you certainly can have a copy of this if I find out the right people to send it to.
Sure.
Yep. Richard, just in general terms, this organisation wants to be a more proactive, responsive, engaged organisation going forward, and we're moving into that space, and it'll take time. So,
yeah.
And also, I think it's worth noting that we have in our LTP and in our current annual plan, we have increased significantly the amount of money that we are spending, particularly probably in the environmental monitoring space, but also science space, regulatory space, and compliance space. So we're lifting our game in the area that you've been talking about today, water quality, etc. Yeah. This is not an opportunity to debate the issue, but there's a couple of questions about to come. Marion and then Kate, and then Hilary.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just, I read that report, the report we've got on our thing today, and you've just talked about the testing. In that report, it said one of our issues is that we test the water, but we don't observe what happens on the land surrounding the water.
Correct.
So that's why I value having the one up further, the testing place up further up the river.
Absolutely.
What would you think would be the value, therefore, of having it at the lagoon as well?
Because the lagoon is a catchment. That is the ultimate place where everything ends up.
Though, does it?
It doesn't tell you what's happened, but it tells you what's happening.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And we
Do you see what I'm going at?
Yeah, that is the place where everything turns wrong. That is where the water stops.
Thank you. Kate?
I'm a tad confused, and I may not have, so apologies. When you talk about my understanding is that we're measuring at the Brighton Road Bridge.
Correct.
In the Kaika stream, which is quite near the lagoon or not?
No, that's upstream. We're talking about the old Brighton Road,
Yeah.
which goes through Waldronville.
Yeah.
That's the lagoon itself.
Yeah.
So that's upstream, those monitoring sites. I might have my roads wrong, but what it is, the testing site is not actually at the lagoon itself down at Waldronville.
I think I've got my things wrong, because I thought Kaipara Valley at Brighton Road, it was very close to it. I mean, considering the length of the Kaipara stream, it is nearer the lagoon than...
It is near the lagoon than some testing sites, you're correct.
Yeah.
However, it is not at the point of saturation. It's not at the point
Okay, so that's what... Okay, so... but you're talking probably hundreds of metres as opposed to...
Oh, no, much further than hundreds of metres.
We can clarify that with you.
2 or 3 k's.
No, that's fine. I've got my roads confused.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, it is confusing. You're right.
Hillary?
Just a quick question. If we followed the report, would you be satisfied with that, or would you be wanting to add something?
Add something.
And that's the testing at the...
That's right.
But apart from that, would when I say add something, I mean it isn't the end of the story. But if we followed that and tested in the lagoon, would that be the beginning of a solution to you? That
would be the beginning to a solution, correct. Thank you for, clarifying that, yeah. The report doesn't go as far as to suggest that that we implement an ongoing systemic testing regime down there. It doesn't go as far as that. It says we'll test it just before we let it out, when it's full. That's what the actual report says. That's not the time. The time is, if you want to prevent this from occurring, the time is you've got to have that ongoing monitoring to know when it's starting to get poor.
So that report plus regular monitoring.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Gretchen.
I was just going to say that Council's implementing an estuarine monitoring program as well, so it is one of those, so it will be monitored through that, but it's not on our state of environment freshwater.
That's news to me, so yes.
So that's good news. Agree with you that it would be.
It would be interesting to know exactly what they're testing. And might I say, I'm not a scientist. I don't do this.
Maybe be in touch with us and we can let you know. Yeah, that'd be good.
Last question, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, just to point out, with their state of the environment, at Brighton Road, the testing that is currently occurring, where non-complying E. coli, the MCI index and periphyton, so regardless of where the testing spot is, I agree, we've obviously got an issue. We need to address it, and it's about time this council...
It's about time it happened. Should have happened a long time ago.
Okay, on that note, on behalf of us all, Richard, thank you very much. You're like many people, you're the eyes and ears out there in the community, and we need to be all working together, whether it's staff, councillors and our community. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for the opportunity, everybody.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
If you give that to somebody up there, they'll circulate it around.
Okay, mate.
Thank you.
Moving on to our second speaker, which is Kath Bowden from First Union with regards to the bus drivers' living wage. And just for everybody's information, but particularly Kath, there is a paper coming to our Finance Committee meeting on the 26th of May with regarding the living wage issue.
We'll be in Queenstown then, though.
We'll be in Queenstown, correct, yep. But in relation to the bus drivers operating under the ORC contracts, we will have a paper in front of us on the 26th of May. We've also got Gary Maloney here, our Transport Manager as well, so he will hear your submission. So, Kath, we're in your hands.
Sorry, can
you hear me okay? I'm Sonia.
Yep.
Kia ora. Cool. So we've got 3 speakers here, I understand. We've got time, 5 minutes for First Union and sort of 5 minutes for Tramways Union.
Yes, the only catch is that we don't want any overlap in terms of your presentation. Sorry,
I'll be
Sonia.
smooth as, I promise.
Sorry.
Right, so kia ora koutou. E mihi ana ki ngā mana whenua o te motu nei, ko Kaitahu, ko Katimamoi, ko Waitaha, ko Arai, ngā hapu, ngā whānau katoa o Arai te Uru. E mihi hoki ki a koutou, me te kaunihira, ka harikoa mātou ki te whakawhiti te whakaro ki a koutou I te rānei. E mihi ki a koutou katoa kua hara mai ki te whakarongo mai, ki te whakaro I tēnei rā. So, e nā mihi hoki ki ngā tangata ki waho ki te rūma rā. E mihi ana ki a rātou hoki. So, e mihi to everyone, e mihi to the council, thank you for having us here, e mihi to everyone here, e mihi to the mana whenua, that was the first one, sorry, I'm skipping my translation, and a big mihi to those who are outside of this room, because we also acknowledge that there's loads of people who don't have the privilege and the ability to come into council offices in the middle of the day for a kōrero, and that includes a lot of the bus drivers, So I'm organiser with First Union. I'm here with 2 delegates who are both bus drivers, one from First Union and one from Tramways Union. So the key thing is that these 2 get to speak today, so I'm going to just briefly say something and hand it over to Kath. We're mainly here because we've been here before, and you guys made a decision to pay the living wage to bus drivers, and we understand that that was budgeted for in the plan from 2020 through to 2021. So our understanding was that that was budgeted for from July last year, but the drivers aren't getting it, hasn't come through. So our question is, where is that living wage? So thank you for supporting it, and where is it? So most of the drivers are on just above the new minimum wage of $20 an hour. So most are less than $21 per hour. We're talking experienced senior drivers. These guys can tell you how long they've worked for their companies, but we're talking for all of the drivers in this room, and we say they're paid under $21 an hour. And I think we'd all agree it's hard work. It's work that requires particular licenses that they've got to keep up, safety checks on the buses, responsibility in terms of dealing with the public, difficulties in terms of dealing with the public. And I'm going to hand it over now to the bus drivers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. It is appreciated. And I also thank you for the opportunity and consideration that we received after the last time I was here, which was in June 2019. Like I say, this is just, again, here to remind you and thank you for your consideration of the living wage for drivers and just asking you to sheet at home. A lot of drivers are weighed down by living cost increases, rents being one of them, and it adds to stress. And if you are driving around Dunedin, we might think, well, it's only little old Dunedin, but post-COVID, drivers are that little more impatient. Some of the customers are under a lot more stress financially and otherwise. And drivers are reporting the odd confrontation that they would not have had, and, or having to call the police to confrontations. So, if they can get them. So, it's a little bit harder out there than it was. COVID lockdown was our duty to do our thing. And most drivers got out there and did it. We really didn't know what we were dealing with, but that's fine. But, not on a living wage. But we were more fortunate than others because the government came to the party with that. And that would have made the difference. Most drivers would have stayed at home, I think. So I guess very briefly, bottom line, drivers are not a charity. We have to live too. The rebuild is coming up soon. There are going to be 1,500 people working on that hospital. There are going to be countless there will not be enough drivers driving concrete buses. Concrete buses. Well, I suppose it is a concrete bus, isn't it? And there will be better paying jobs. And also with the bubble in Oz opening up, people might want to go there. I mean, just prior to lockdown, I had a colleague left to go to Melbourne, $25 Aussie an hour. Why wouldn't you? Yeah. So thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you.
It is appreciated.
Stick around, there might be questions.
I'd actually prefer to stand if I can.
No, good as gold. So just check, are you Alan or Phil?
I'm Alan Saville, representing the Tramways Union.
Thank you.
I will redo my speech. It's all been said. We know why we're here. So I won't go through what I was going to say. The situation, though, has reminded me of my primary school motto, which was deeds, not words. It served me well through my previous careers of military and farming and forestry, and now into bus driving. So for the outcomes that we want today, probably the worst one is more words. Words about why we haven't received our pay rise. But hopefully it'll come with an implementation date of when we are going to get it, when it's going to come.
And back pay?
And back pay back to the 1st of July 2020. Yeah. The next best outcome for us would be more words, probably in a form of a written letter. The cheque is in the mail. I don't know whether that's going to come or not. But the best one from the council and one that would be most appreciated by the bus drivers is action. And that is putting this money into our bank accounts that rightly belongs to us. So that's all. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Alan, Kath and Sonia. Appreciate you being here today. I'm not going to get into the detail about, because I think it's all been in the paper, why we're in this situation. And I did make the comment at the front end that there is that paper coming to our Finance Committee meeting on the 26th of May. But sorry, Sonia, you were going to...
Sorry, I'm not clear about why we're in this situation.
Well, this is an operational matter, but I will... just what I've been told is it seems to be that as the contracts are renewed, that is when the living wage is triggered in terms of what filters down to the staff. But anyway, I'll ask Sarah to comment just to make sure I'm on the right track, or would you like Gary to comment?
I think it'd be better if Gavin did.
Okay. Gavin, is there anything you would like to just share with us with regards to the question from Sonia, why we're in this situation?
I think it's best handled by way of the paper, because this is a national issue that we're involved in other players with. So I think we need to tell you the full story and the full information. Yep. And we'll bring that to you in the paper on the 26th. Appreciate that, Gavin. Yep. What I don't want, sorry, Sonia, to cut across, but what I don't want is for us to have a debate about why we're in this situation. The opportunity to be here with the public forum is to share with us the issue you have, and then it's up to us to react rather than trying to resolve it here today.
No, that's okay. It's just that you said there was an explanation provided and I wasn't clear what that was, and we've been waiting, and I'm still not quite clear on the explanation that's been provided. We're in the business of bargaining, and I'm not aware of any offer that's been made for the living wage, and I'm pretty sure both our unions would snaffle that up if that was on offer. I'm not aware of bargaining being an issue.
Yep. Like I say, I don't want us to use this forum to try and resolve the matter. You've made it very clear what you're asking, and it's an operational matter that is going to be presented to us, as I say, in May, and hopefully that will resolve it. Okay.
Yeah. These guys are part of operations. I'm just saying they're the workers. So if you've got questions, this is a good time.
No, cool. Yeah. Righto. Marion, and then Michael.
It is to you as union. At this time, about 5 months ago, when Kate heard from drivers that living wage wasn't being delivered, I rang your union, or one of your unions in Wellington, because I began to sense that this was a bigger issue than locally. and was advised that there had been a meeting between CTU, and I don't care if I'm breaking things at the moment, between the minister at that time, this was before the elections, and between some of the bus companies. And it was agreed then that there would be a living wage plus conditions, because there are some troubles with Wellington, paid nationally. It then went into freezer land and hasn't come out. So I've got another problem, and it's not actually just to do with your things. It's a relationship between a government or a pseudo-government, a council, and our contracts. Because we will often ask for things to do with buses. We ask for smaller buses. We get advised, no, that's not economic. And it seems as though the person holding the contract has more power than the person paying the money.
Yep. Oh, well, let's stay on task.
I just want to make that known that there's a crossness around the council.
Thanks, Marion. Michael Laws.
Yes,
Just use your microphone, Michael, please. Is it on?
no. It says it's on.
But second button on the right?
How's that?
No, it's on. That's it.
Okay. Can I just say that I share your perplexity at why a council decision hasn't been mandated yet. But this is the question. I guess the second perplexity I have is why it's going to take 5 weeks from today before we're going to discuss it again. And I am perplexed by that too. But I guess the question I have of you is, there is the suggestion hovering in the background that this has become bigger than Dunedin, bigger than Queenstown, that there is a national issue. And I think the previous questioner just alluded to that as well. Is that your understanding? Or is this, as far as you're concerned, very much a Dunedin/Otago issue?
I think in this forum, the primary question is, we understand that money was allocated by this council to pay the living wage to drivers in this region as of July last year, the living wage. So whatever discussions are going on at a national level, and the issue of living wage is certainly a live one in the bus sector, there was a commitment made for the drivers in this region, and the drivers in this region don't understand why they haven't received the money that was guaranteed, right?
Well, it wasn't guaranteed, it was voted for.
My understanding, it was budgeted for, so money's gone. So who's spending that money? Because it ain't the drivers. And these people are part of your community. They've got families in this community, yeah? And their ability to live here, spend money here, do things here is affected by the wages
Sorry,
they're
can
getting.
I go back to the question though? I need you to answer the question. And the question is there anything happening at a national level that you're aware of that is impeding that living wage being put into place in Dunedin and Otago?
We are unaware of anything happening at a national level that would be preventing the council from implementing that promise around the living wage.
Okay. Kath, you want to respond on that question?
If I may, the government policy is that all government people who are in receipt of government contracts on a global level pay the living wage. So at a global level, one would assume if Dunedin gets it, everybody's going to get it. And so it would be interesting to see if other people are getting it in a similar situation. And if not, why not? And if that is impacting here. I don't know that. I'm just floating a question.
Yeah, Waka Kotahi did apparently commit to and we're talking a minimum base rate. We're not talking for drivers of many, many years experience, a minimum base rate of the living wage in September last year.
Okay.
So that's the government funding arm has done that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Kevin.
Look, I'd just like to say, as the governance team for the Otago area, the Otago Regional Council, who control the bus contracts, we have decreed here that the living wage should be paid. And if we have budgeted back to drive, it should be being paid. It is not a national issue. It is the people of Otago demanding that we pay our bus drivers the minimum pay. So we need very soon, this is
Kevin,
called,
I don't want us to get into...
So I'm going to ask a question here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
So I'm coming very close. I'd be very happy to sit with you and find a way through, because the company controlling it cannot use this as a national issue. The people of Otago through us have said, we want you paid that wage. We should be getting it paid from the time we said. So I'm happy to sit with you and work. And the question is, would you like me to help?
Can I just...
No, sorry. Thank you. Now, Hilary, this is the last question.
My question is, it seems that it's on our agenda in 5 weeks for the Finance Committee, and so you will, as members of the public anyway, see in advance the agenda coming out there. Are we to assume that what you would like us to do on that date is attempt to carry out what we attempted to do for this year and get back to you about what's happening? That's when we're next going to look at it. So I'm really, I guess, asking how you would best like that to be engaged with, which is going to be on that day.
Thank you, Elliot. That will now take it out to over 10 months. And in that 10 months, you have raised the expectations and with that, the hopes of hundreds of drivers. What we'd like is action, not more words of we're going to do this or we're going to consider, but do it. You want to give us the money. We want the money. Let's do it.
Okay.
Budgeted the money, so maybe finding out where your money's gone might be.
This is your last word. Sorry, Kath.
It will be.
Yes.
I appreciate, because where I think you're headed is towards transparency, and I think transparency would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Kath. Thank you, Sonia. And look, you made it very, very clear. We understand the message. So I'll say no more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kevin.
Kate, this relates. Kate, this relates to this
It
topic.
does relate to this one. I appreciate I just put my hand up. But at some stage, are we going to have an opportunity to ensure that the report has what we need to have covered in it, not necessarily just what the staff want to report on? Because one of the questions I would like to, for example, be able to ask in that light is there any way that we can pay the drivers directly despite what the contract says the contractor wants?
I would expect the chair and deputy chair of the Finance Committee
to cover those off. Consider the offer accepted.
To follow that up with the general manager. Sarah, you want to answer it now?
I don't expect an answer now. I just want to make sure it's covered in that report.
Yep, it'll be covered. Okay, as I alluded to at the front end of the meeting, we're now going to move into non-public to deal with the item regarding the head office accommodation update. So I will move that the public be excluded, seconded by Councillor Hope, and this is under Lagoima section 48(1)A, that the public are excluded for the discussion of the following item being the head office accommodation update. I move, seconded by Carmen. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
I thought you were discussing the report.
Kevin's here. Yeah, that is the
You're going to say office accommodation.
I think it's the fact that he can only
To do with it.
Yeah.
Yes, and also I'll move, and I'm looking for a seconder for Mr. Winders to stay in the room. Thank you, Carmen. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Marion, you're okay? Did you?
I thought you had said that you were splitting up the times that we were in Purda, and that this one we were going to do Port, but I thought I heard you say in your motion that we were going to do accommodation.
This is for accommodation.
So the item,
Not for the court.
so this,
For
and Kevin with the work he does with ECAN and associated with the management with Waitaki and Meridian work, etc. So that were my reasons why I suggested that they are the appropriate people.
Second you.
Pardon?
Second.
Thank you.
Can I ask just, there seems to be quite a lot of work involved there, and I wondered whether those people would like somebody as an alternate or whatever, like for instance, Gary could shadow Kevin, or I'm just, and I don't know whether Alexa would like somebody too. So is that appropriate to have somebody as an, not as well as, but as an either or? If
Would Gavin or Andrea just like to highlight the expected number of meetings per annum and the expected sort of commitment other than those meetings?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So the terms of reference show that the Wild and Conifer Regional Coordination Group is due or proposed to meet quarterly, and the Wallaby Management Group is proposed to meet every second month. I would expect that staff would do the majority of preparation and brief the chairs in terms of their focus and roles and responsibilities. Does that cover everything?
Yeah, I do.
Given
perhaps an alternate in the case that the primary person was unavailable to meet would be useful as a backup.
Okay.
That's where I was sort of getting.
Kevin and Alexa, any thoughts in that regard?
Yeah,
you'd be.
I think it'd be great to have an alternate, frankly.
Okay.
I mean, there's times when you can't make things, and it's a useful thing to do.
Okay, so the email, I remember, I think Gary volunteered, Carmen, Kate, if I got that right. So either any of the three of you willing to be a backup for either Alexa or Kevin?
I'm willing to.
Could you give an indication of which group, just so we know for the staff?
Wallabies probably would make more sense.
Okay. Kate or Carmen with regards to Wild and Conifers?
I'm happy to do Wild, but I'm happy to defer to Carmen as well.
No,
Okay.
I'll take this, that I'm happy to be you if you're happy, Councillor Wilson.
Okay.
That would be great.
Okay, thank you for raising that, Hilary.
Thanks, Hilary.
So,
can I just ask a question
Gary,
on that, though? So when you say alternate, they would be a member of the group, so they would be attending the meetings.
Only if the other one can't.
So how then do they chair if they haven't been doing this at the previous meetings and are unfamiliar with the...
They read the minutes.
Yes, and staff.
So why not have two councillors as a member of these groups? One as the chair, as highlighted, and a second one.
I mean, I've personally got no problem with that.
Come along if you like, and if not, doesn't matter.
Okay.
Knowing that we'd always have one.
Yeah.
At least one.
It's a good idea.
Okay. So if we...
It is, it's a good idea.
Perhaps if we have an additional recommendation that covers off the two councillors for the two different groups. So just make it nice and clear in the recommendation. Di, could you perhaps just come up with a tweak? But I'll just go to questions because there may be some. So sorry, just going back, Gavin and Andrea, was there anything you wanted to comment on in terms of introducing the report?
No, just to comment that the total funding for the Wildings is 14 million. It's 5.9 million in year one.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Andrea, all good? Any questions, queries?
Kate
and Brian.
The technicality is whether you've got voting rights. I think anyone chairing these meetings would be looking for a collaborative approach rather than going to a split vote. But it just does make it murky if you add another vote in there.
So only one person gets to vote or chair it.
Yeah.
But the other person's welcome.
I think that's... Otherwise, we're actually changing the balance.
Yes, I was going to say
that presence. I'm really happy if that second part of that motion is that the alternate may attend, but only one voting right will be apportioned to the ORC.
Okay.
Or something like that, no?
The general consensus is that? Okay. So we'll just hold that thought for a moment. Are there any other questions and queries? Carmen?
Did I just pick up right through you, the chair, that did I have this right or did I have this wrong? One meets
every second month and one meets quarterly. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think that's why it is really important. And I would push home Councillor Calvert's thought there, sorry, Hilary, about why it is important to have two people, because it's quite a consistent meeting.
Yeah.
So I endorse that too through the chair.
Thank you. Just a question for either Gavin or Andrea. On page 18, you've got the membership of the Welding Conifer group, and I just note in the partner agencies, Clutha District wasn't included and should be.
Should it be?
Yes, they should be. Yes, it was just a bit of an oversight. Clutha District Council should be included in the membership.
Okay, so we just note that addition. Yep. Okay. Any other queries, questions? Alexa?
I had one more query around this too. Landowner representatives. I wondered why the Wild and Conifer control groups, the two of them, were landowner representatives. I thought that was an odd way to describe those groups, because they're not actually the landowners.
Andrea.
Through the chair, we could have them as partners, but ultimately they are the mechanism to engage one-on-one with the landowners. So I suppose they have the most, they are one source of knowledge around individual landowners within the structure, but we could easily put them as partner agencies as well.
Through the chair, the only thing that worried me about them being there is that sometimes they counter resistance from landowners. So, sometimes they can't get landowners to do what they ask them to do. And I thought that there's potential for an issue. Yeah.
You might want to have them stakeholders.
Yeah, but more than that though, aren't they?
They're not partners.
They're doing the work. Spending the money. I don't know. If you think it's okay with them being in there, I haven't heard from any of those groups to say it's a problem, but I did think.
But stakeholders would do, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think if we created a category of stakeholders, that would be the best fit.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
So we note that change. Any other queries, Carmen?
Through the chair, I would just like to ask, you've got that and I agree with Councillor Forbes there. Is there any reason why you couldn't have Federated Farmers too as a landhold representative on your Wilding Pines, please? You have it in the Wallabies. They also have good powers. I mean, as Ms Howard's just said, you're trying to get people to do something. I think it's great to have both balances though. We've got New Zealand forest owners on both, but we don't seem to have it on Wilding Conifers, and I'd like to see that added. Please.
Through the chair, yes, we can invite them. I suppose we just viewed Wilding Conifers not being their primary area of focus and responsibility, but there's no issue in inviting them.
Good lever.
So you're suggesting Feds as a stakeholder?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that, yep.
They could please.
Well, they'd be as a partner agency, wouldn't they be?
They will be the landowner.
They'll be the landowner representatives,
You really want that. That's the important key.
Stakeholders like the other one.
Yep.
We mirror. Okay. Perhaps.
So if we just note those tweaks, so landholder representative becomes stakeholders, and Fed Farmers is included as well in the Wilding Conifer membership. Clutha District's included in the partner agencies, and a third recommendation that appoints Kevin and Gary to the Wilding Conifer group, and Alexa and Kate. Beg pardon, Kevin and Gary to the Wallaby group. Alexa and Kate to the Wilding Conifer group.
With them having a vote only if the chair, if the
only one vote.
Other one is not there. Sorry, you don't need to add those extra names into that motion. That doesn't make sense. Sorry, I've just done something very quickly for Diane.
Oh, well done.
And because those memberships as chairs are already in the reference group, they don't need to be referred to.
Sorry. Very good. Yeah. Noting that they're unable to use. Okay. Everyone comfortable? Yes.
Yes, very.
I will.
Thank you.
Happy I put the 3 recommendations all as one?
Yes.
Yep. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. I hope you can still meet your other commitments this afternoon. Who moved and seconded? Good question, Carmen.
And Marion.
And Marion.
Chair Hobbs.
Thank you.
Mr Chair, you invited questions and queries and then moved straight into the vote. So we missed the opportunity to actually debate or talk about the recommendations.
Yes,
yeah?
I apologise. And
No, that's fine. I would have said something, but I didn't have anything to say. But just in terms of that, I'm hoping you won't do it on the next report.
No. When the staff made it clear they need to be somewhere else, I was probably a little bit hasty, and I regret taking that approach.
Yeah, instead of big report coming up.
Okay, we won't do it again. Moving on to item 7.2.
You're going to have Curly here soon.
Which is the State of the Environment Water Quality Report. And this paper presents a report on the state of the water sampling that has been carried out over the last 5 years, and it gives us an indication of the state of and the trends, and includes the 20-year period. So it picks up on what has been the baseline that was created between the previous 5-year report, the 2012 to 2017, and also the current 2015 and 2020. Welcome, Rachel. Welcome, Julie. I was just going to make a couple of other comments, and welcome, Anita. But essentially, this gives us an overall picture of where we're at. Thank you for the report. It is in a form that is easier, I think, in past reports to absorb. So that's good. This is obviously a statutory requirement that we must undertake this reporting. Clearly, it's a core function for this organisation to ensure that natural resources are managed in a sustainable way. The key component, I think, in this is that there are some pieces of the puzzle that we haven't quite got in place yet. Understanding, great to have the data and the knowledge, understanding what it means. There is still some missing parts to find a home, and you talked about the land
activities.
Yes, the land activities, the land use practices, etc., and having a better understanding and what's actually happening in terms of environmental enhancement, and also clearly the developing of a policy to make sure that the non-regulatory interventions that will create action plans further down the track, once again, that is also a policy that is in the motions of being developed. So I won't say any more. Rachel, is there some comments you would like to make? And thank you for the report.
Thank you. The only comments I'd like to make are, A, the analysis wasn't done in-house, it was done by land water people, and they're the people who do the analysis for LAWA, so they're the top people in New Zealand. B, that all the data collected was done by our in-house environmental monitoring team, so they should be acknowledged. And C, the data is as it is. It is as read, and as you've already noted, it's difficult to interpret why some of these trends are happening when we don't have the supporting information. But I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you very much. We will include in the motion the acknowledgement of the in-house monitoring team, but thank you for that. Julie, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I just want to mention that it was Anita as acting GM that brought the paper through, so I'm just here to support any questions.
Okay.
If needed. Yeah.
Anita, any comment at this point?
Yeah, through you, Chair, and thanks, Julie. I just used.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear me?
No.
Unmute. I'm unmuted.
This needs to go for a bit.
There's something up on this video.
That's a camera. That's our camera.
Can you hear me
Perhaps we'll
now?
just go to questions and then we'll go
Yeah,
back
we
to
hear you
Anita.
now.
Oh,
Coming up.
sorry.
No, that's all good.
Yes, reduced.
I'm not sure that's. I'll try. I'll try. I actually can't speak because there's a really bad feedback coming through at my end.
Yeah, you're coming and going at our end. You didn't hear me. Okay, we'll go to questions. Marion and then Michael Decker.
Just a
and then
quick
Alexa.
one. This, I presume, is public.
Yes.
Right, and are we going to put it up on our website?
It is up on the website.
It is up on the website. Thank you.
Michael Decker.
Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate Rachel and her colleagues and LWP, and I noticed that you have acknowledged your colleagues right at the end of the paper, which is really good to see because, boy, there's been a lot of work going to this. Phenomenal. My question is, why is there no glossary? As a lay person who doesn't have a chemistry background, this was one of the most challenging papers I have ever read. And even a glossary of terms at the outset would have been helpful so I could flick back and find out exactly what a lot of these terms meant. And I haven't got a set of examples because there'd be so many of them. This paper is full of technicalities. And I've no argument with that. But if you're writing for us as your audience, boy, you are miles away from the mark as far as I'm concerned. But I did struggle through it, and I think I managed to understand what the paper wanted me to understand. That is that we've got a hell of a problem, and it isn't getting better. And that brings me to my second question. Firstly, about having a glossary at the outset. Secondly, we keep being told by a variety of groups around Otago, several of whom we are funding now, that they are getting exciting results in terms of their improving water qualities in the Pomahaka, around Wanaka, in the Maniatoto, in the Marahirakia. I don't see that reflected here at all. I don't see any improving trends in the areas which we're most concerned about, probably especially in West Otago, around the Heriotburn and all those creeks. It's a bit of a disaster. So how do we reconcile those two streams of information? The people on the ground who are out there testing and feeling proud of the progress they're making, and this analysis done by independent experts, which tell us, forget it, it's not good. What's the answer to those two questions?
Pass. Rachel, Julie, do you want to make any comment? Or Anita?
Science. Through the chair, there's a couple of points there. Firstly, these are state of the environment monitoring sites, so they might not quite represent what the catchment groups themselves are working on, the testing that they're undertaking. So that's the first point. Thank you for the great feedback around the glossary of terms. I take that point on board, definitely. I'd also like to let you know that our comms team with ORC are working with others to better communicate the science, right. Okay, and for different audiences. So that's coming later in this year. Please, I understand the technicalities around this. There is a statutory requirement around this particular piece of work, and it does help inform or contribute to the land and water plan, providing us that base knowledge for SOE sites. That's really important.
Yeah. And I'd just like to make one comment around the trends. The trends were done in a 20-year time frame and a 10-year time frame. Yes. And if you look at the 10-year time frame, it is better than the 20-year time frame.
Thank you for that.
Certainly a bit less red in the two graphs.
That's exactly
for
right.
sure.
Yeah, less red.
That's right at the end of the paper, isn't it?
Yeah. Alexa, then Brian, then Hilary.
Thank you for this report. I agree with Michael. I found that it was very difficult that some of the acronyms were spelt out the first time they were used, but to try and go back and keep finding the first time they were used was quite confusing. So a glossary would be really helpful. I'd love to have at some point a workshop, Sarah, that takes us through some of those charts, which despite my best efforts, I didn't fully understand, and I'd like to. The next thing was I was wondering how this State of the Environment report might somehow be complemented by some of the citizen science and other stuff that's coming through from other catchments. And so, you might know more about the Pomahaka, I know a little bit more about Lake Hayes. And I think the people at Lake Hayes are worried that this doesn't capture the high water flows, when there's stuff going wrong because of high water flows. So they think that the Lake Hayes bit is looking actually stronger than it is. And looking better than it actually is. But so I understand, and I've explained to them that this is a state of the environment with fixed points and so on, but I wonder if we can have a plan to start to integrate some of that other knowledge in here. And it talks about often in the report about not having the land use information to really understand why things are not always going the right way, or if they are going the right way, very slowly. And I think that we need to start thinking about how we're going to map the land use. I think we're already working on that, aren't we, Sarah?
Well, we are. We've got our first land scientist. We haven't had a land scientist for a long time. So, it hasn't been a focus of this council traditionally to focus on land so much.
We're part of an integrated system, and we now have Te Mana o Te Wai to answer to. And this isn't what we're seeing in this really comprehensive report is that Te Mana o Te Wai hasn't even got a look in. It's nowhere near the top of the list. And I want to see how we're going to plan to get the health of our water at the top of the list. And this report's telling me, if I'm wrong, please correct me, that we're not going to be able to do that without understanding the land use changes as well. But thank you for the report. Those are my comments. Question. Yeah, go, Anita.
Sorry, I was just going to say, through you, Chair, what the SOE report does is enable us to start identifying the land use interventions we need based on what the report shows us. So we've had some really positive meetings with the science team around the Upper Lakes, Catlins, Dunedin and Coast FMU, and we've got the rest of them. We're meeting with them tomorrow. And then we've also got a meeting with one of the top modellers in the country in a week's time, just to figure out how we manage that gap until we've got the land use data. So we're absolutely going to be managing that going forward. And the report is, I was super excited to read it. It's really useful from a policy point of view, and potentially the most useful thing I've read for a long time. So you'll start to see the differences that those results show you manifesting through the FMU provisions with Te Mana o Te Wai at the centre.
And just the answering the other question I had, and I'm sorry I buried it in a whole pile of statements, was that are we going to find some way of bringing in the citizen science and other data like high flow data and things like that can complement this information?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the process of going out to the community and engaging that the MPSFM drives you to is to make sure that you've got as much information as you can, and that's some of that's really technical information as you're describing, but it's also the social and cultural information that we need to build the picture of what the FMU or the Rohe looks like. So we use that information to supplement and support the information that we have.
Oh, sorry, it's more a question for Rachel and Julie, but the SOE reporting is statutory. I'm just wondering whether it allows you to have that level of freedom or whether it's actually quite confined. So it might not be an SOE report where we could integrate
to the FMUs.
That information.
It's somewhere else, yeah.
It's when we do the FMUs.
Brian.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. A couple of questions, if I may. Yesterday I attended a meeting of the OCC, the Otago Catchment Community Group, and in it I said, look, we've got this State of the Environmental report, and I've heard your comment that the 10-year last 10 years picture is maybe a bit better than the 20-year picture. And they asked me the question, well, what did the report actually say in terms of making headway in terms of water quality on our rivers? And what should I have said to them?
That's the tricky thing, isn't it?
Well, that's what people, the public, we talk about communication strategy, so, what should I have said?
The only thing that you can say is what the report says. And so it's data-driven, and the information there is, A, the state, so you can tell them where we sit with regard to the new NPSFM requirements, so what the state of the river generally is. And you can also comment on where we are with the trend in water quality, whether it's degrading or improving in that 10-year and 20-year cycle.
Yeah. So you refer to the data as what you're saying?
Refer to the data.
Okay. One of the, I started digging in the report, and one of the key things from me was in it where it said, however, in nearly all cases, monitoring sites identified as degraded in previous reports from targeted catchment studies remain degraded. There's been very little change in the pattern of water quality throughout Otago. But I had to go and dig for that, to sort of find that comment. I know in previous reports it's been something like a third of our SOE sites were either poor or fair, and 2/3 were good or excellent. And that could at least sort of give a bit of a reality check to the community when they ask that question. The key table that I actually saw was on page 253 of the report. It's right near the end.
126 of 137 if you're on the other ones.
Is that?
Yeah.
All those
253 is a good one.
And so, we've got 124 sites. And I think with that report, so this is my question, if you could just help me sort of interpret this. There's 124 SOE sites, and I think that if I did actually count them all up, there was something like 2/3 of them, like just looking at it even seems more, but had some non-compliance with the national bottom line. In fact, it actually looks more than that. It looks like just about all of them. Oh, no, hang on a minute. This is just a proportion of the sites, so some of them aren't there. So there's something like, there's 78 in this list out of the 124. So something like 2/3 of the state of the environment sites had some non-compliance. And when you look at it, when you go in there, like, for example, the gentleman here this morning on the Kaikra stream, there were 4 non-compliance on the Kaikra stream. And so there's a hell of a lot of work to do. And I'd like to think in any communication strategy, because, like you look at, it's a little bit hard to interpret at the start, to actually say something like that there's work to be done, refer to this specific table, and then there's underlying detail. But the big picture is that 78 of our 124 SOE sites have some non-compliance, because I've heard comments over the years, Brian, is it really as bad as suggested? Well, that's right. There it is. And I look forward to, elsewhere in the report, I look forward to science developing a land science program. I look forward to the establishing policy to prioritise the degraded sites and to establish non-regulatory action plans. I look forward to all of that. And I do hope that the governance and the community are involved in that, so that there's some transparency in terms of what's going on, because quite frankly, we're not making much progress. We have in relation to 20 years ago when the water quality was better, but the last 10 years there's been an equal number of degrading catchments as there have been improving catchments. Yeah? Is that fair?
On particular parameters.
On particular parameters. I'm really surprised. Why is this, last question. Why is there so many blooming E. coli non-compliance? I thought we'd basically sorted E. coli. There's obviously the fencing rules and so forth, but how can this...
E. coli, sorry to interrupt, the E. coli is a very difficult parameter to comply with. you've got 4 or is it 5 statistics that you must comply with, and if you fail one, and one being the 95th percentile, then that means that you're down in the band D. So if you think about that logically, if you were taking, I'm going to get my maths wrong, but if you were taking 20 samples a year, if you failed 2, then you would be grade D, according to the MPSFM. So that is a very difficult parameter to comply with. If you look in the Upper Lakes, most of that catchment in the Upper Lakes Rohe, most of the catchment is absolutely fine. It's when we get to the lowland pastoral sites that it's very difficult to comply with, which is why you're seeing so much non-compliance in West Otago and Dunedin, for example.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that? We, until recently, through Plan Change 8, we haven't managed or controlled effluent disposal, and we haven't seen the effects of the NES in terms of grazing and things like that. So, and we've also got quite old septic tank rules. So there's a lot of interventions that we can do that will start to improve those E. coli numbers. We would hope, we would think, based on the science that everyone else has done.
Thank you. Hilary.
I got in amongst this report, and thank you very much for it, and it was quite complex for my head. I would like to see if we could have, separate from this report, which has got a sort of an audit statutory sort of feel about it, a summary which involved each of the places we monitor with perhaps 20 years ago, 15, 10, 5 now, 5 points or something. And so as that we could look at all of them, and that it also said at the end of the column something like the issue in this site is E. coli mostly, and we are expecting this to improve as a result of such and such. Or the problem here is nitrogen and such, or although this has picked up something like E. coli, we expect this to be a sort of a technical non-compliance more than we're not terribly worried about it or whatever. So a statement at the end of each of the ones, and at the bottom of the sites saying we actually really critically need some more sites here to help us understand what we're missing, such that they could be divided into each FMU or whatever later to help form a picture of each of those. So as we've got in one place a sort of schedule of each of them and what they sort of might mean to us. Is that a doable sort of thing? Because otherwise I'm sort of, while appreciating the work that's gone into this and understanding that it needs to happen, it didn't help me answer any of the general questions in my head about which sites or which of these matter even more than others. Do people want to swim in some of them and not others? Do they?
The intent of this report was to just produce a document which provides the data from our safe environment reporting. And the second point was to organise it into FMU chapters so that you could look at the FMUs and see what water quality was like then, and in the baseline state, which was 2012 to 2017, this is for state, and also the 2 periods for trends. And I agree, there's not a lot of interpretation going on in the report. The point of the report was to get the data out there. It. So what I hear you're asking is for interpretation of the data.
Yes. And just sort of snapshots in each of the sites, 5 year or whatever, because I couldn't even figure out whether they were 10 years on 10 years getting better or worse, or whether they were 5 year into. I obviously wasn't concentrating properly, but
I just wondered, Alexa suggested that we should workshop this at some later date, and I wonder whether we should, there's a recommendation up there that we follow that pathway, and I just wondered we should hang off, and some of these questions I think might be better in a workshop when A, we've got the time, and B, staff are able to provide the answers, etc. So we're not under time pressure is probably what I'm trying to say.
I understand that, but I don't want to go over this report in a workshop. What I want is it to be presented in a way that my non-scientific head can get its head round, and so as I can look at
so I suppose
things,
well, I suppose what I'm trying to say, if we can have a workshop that then converts that data and information into a more meaningful style, so we can then absorb it and perhaps talk about the things that you've referred to, those hot spots in the FMUs, and probably thinking about more outcomes, i.e. the action plans that potentially could fall out of the non-regulatory stuff. Obviously further science that perhaps is required to refine those particular actions or whatever. Gwyneth.
I was just going to say, I think I've heard from a couple of people, I think some of what you're asking for is a snapshot of a snapshot, if that makes sense, like the report on a page kind of thing, which I think we can probably do. We can have a go at trying to make a really high-level report on a page. I think some of the happy to consider doing a workshop if you want to dive into trying to understand some of the detail, and that is helpful for you to do as well. I think some of the things, Hillary, you're talking about in your last column are some of the things Anita's starting to talk about in terms of what we'll be developing up in policy space. So that is going to be an evolving story over time as we go through our land and water plan, as we talk to communities and understand what their aspirations are as well, not just what the national bottom lines are. So definitely happy to think about a report on a page type thing as a communications tool, and if people want a workshop to facilitate one of those as well if we need to.
Thanks, Gwyneth. So I'll just go back to so Hillary, does that cover off where you're at?
Yes, I'm hoping that when I've got that I might understand it and not need to ask questions at a workshop.
Okay, well, if what Gwyneth's suggesting, we get the additional info, and if that helps us to absorb the report better, and we don't require a workshop, so be it, but potentially having that step.
I appreciate the comment at the end would change, a year later, although we might not get necessarily another year's data because it might be 5 years at a time. That comment would change because, yes, we are achieving something by the septic tanks or whatever. So,
Julie.
Thank you, Chair. So alongside this process is in the action plan policy and process that we're trying to get our head around at the moment too, and how we actually remedy some of these issues and how we prioritise those. So, and that will deal with the non-regulatory and regulatory parts of this, and that's a requirement of the National Policy Statement, FM 2020 as well.
So perhaps at that workshop, if we decide to have one, we could have an update of just where that policy's at and your thinking around the sort of the framework. Maybe. So just so Julie's not on the spot because she's not necessarily leading the work, she's involved, but so just in terms of timeframes, we're looking to bring that to you before the middle of the year anyway. So we'll just have to look at timings around. If we go down a path of workshop, it might actually be about the same time as we come to you at council with that work around prioritisation. Thank you. All said, Hillary. Kate.
Thank you, and you've actually just raised the point. I'm less than satisfied, sorry, and I'm going to sound petulant, I don't mean to be, to just receive this report or do that. What I would like to do is, and the question is to whomever is in the place to say, that we should receive this report and note that we will be getting actions or better understanding in May or June. I think we need to do that, otherwise it is a disconnect, and then anyone reading this can see that we're going to follow up. My first question is that doable, and what is that date and that time frame?
So the work that's being referred to is us developing up a prioritisation tool. So don't forget, water quality is just one attribute that we'd be looking at in terms of looking at a particular site, to allow us to think about how we might prioritise which I guess, remediation or implementation to improve environmental outcomes, whether it's water is being a key one, obviously. So how we might prioritise that, because as Brian pointed out, that table that he referred to, there is a long number of sites, right? So, and they have different attributes which they are below the national bottom line. So we as an organisation need to be able to work out how we actually prioritise this. So that's the first piece of work that we'll bring to you. And the second one is probably a more operational internal one, which is really about how we as a business go about developing up those plans, right?
Yeah, so the motion would be notes that we'll get prioritisation at what meeting? So someone reading this, Mr. Robson, who's frustrated,
I've committed to do it before the middle of the year. Look, it's on the draft, Yeah.
So that's what I think we need to put
at the moment. It's tentatively May, but we're just having some internal things that might be June. But by the 30th of June,
by the end of the financial year. Yeah. So we received this report, and note that we will have a report back on priority actions.
What we're bringing to you is the tool to be able to, so we all agree about how we prioritise.
Okay. The mechanism to prioritise the areas, the degraded areas by the end of the financial year.
And through that process, we're having an attempt to actually run. We're obviously testing that tool and running it ourselves.
I'm happy to write that. So I've got more to that. That was my first question. I want to ensure that it's an action that the staff are happy with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Di's picked up on your suggestion.
I'm happy to send it to her if it's easier.
Great idea.
Yeah. The second question is, and I don't want to ask this question if we're going to have a workshop, but I think the people that want me to ask the question or would want to understand it deserve to be able to hear the question and get the answer. So the question is, can the workshop be public? And this is Hillary's point, and I can't believe she didn't bring it up herself. But for the Mr. Robson, who wants to know how we're discussing the kite cry, or me wanting to understand what on page 137 of 155, I don't want to presume that I understand what that graph at Catlin's is, but I want to know if that is a good end result in the 10 years compared to the 20 years. Is there a catchment group working there? And could it be their work? I don't know, because that's not the joined up story here, and that's why I would like to know if that workshop does happen, whether it can be public.
Sarah.
So my answer to that is really it depends on the direction that you give me about that wider conversation that we will have in the next little while.
Okay. Okay. And I shall send Diane what I think is where I will send it to you too.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Michael Laws, then Alexa, then Brian, then Gretchen, then Marion.
Mine was actually on that last issue that's just been raised.
So we want to deal with that last issue now?
Yes, please.
Okay, right. Marion and then Gretchen.
What I'm worried about is that we have this report and we have a piece of work that we're involved in at FMU level to build a land and water plan. And I would hate to see us doing what I will call bitification in response to Mr. Robson or whomever, that we suddenly take up little bits and do them and stuff up some quite coordinated, thoughtful planning forward as we're doing the FMUs.
Okay. Gretchen?
And mine's on this as well, in that we can draw from this report that it's not good enough in Otago water quality at the moment. And we were asked this morning, do we care enough? Obviously, we haven't cared enough in the past, but we do care enough going forward to have prioritised freshwater and the improvement of quality of freshwater as our number one issue in the LTP. And it's why we're projecting some major increases in rating. One of the strong reasons for that anyway is our prioritisation of that. So to ask for a piece by the end of June of a massive work program to address this issue, I don't think is helpful, because yes, we do need to understand what this says, absolutely, but that takes some time. We haven't got enough information here to be able to say what are our issues in Otago and how are we going to solve them. That's very important before we then move forward to the next bit of actually doing the programs. We're investing in all sorts of things as council, from compliance to planning to action as well, because it's not good enough to say, oh, okay, we're just going to wait till the end of the FMU process before we do anything, because actually there's always going to be a planning process. We've always been planning the whole way through our society. So at some point we actually have to do something. We've seen that water has significantly degraded between the 10 and 20 year block. Since then, it's kind of in a holding-ish pattern, with some still degrading, some improving. We don't really understand that picture really well, and that's what our whole program is about, and to work really well with community to do that. There's so many strands to that. The thing that we've asked by the end of June is just a prioritisation for some of the action. But yeah, I think there's a massive piece. I actually feel quite embarrassed in a way that this is where we're at as a council. We have basic information about the environment, but we don't have the information that we actually need to be able to progress dealing with environmental issues at the level that we need to keep up with our community's desires for us. So that's our job.
I ask whether that means Gretchen's unhappy with Gwyneth doing what she's doing, or
no, I'm really happy with that. I just see it as a small piece of what we're doing as a council.
I think it also probably reflects we haven't had a land plan, and it just shows how important that integrated approach is going forward. So we're sort of playing a bit of catch up here. But Julie.
I just want to add to that, as already mentioned, we're developing a land science team. We're already embarking on land use activity mapping across the region to give us that level of detail and information that we need, and how that's changed over time as well. So that piece of work's underway. There'll be a really big interest in that piece of work, yes.
To be fair, Diane, I've also sent it to Gwyneth. If Gwyneth could look at it before it goes public, might be helpful for her.
Thanks, Kate. So I've got Michael, Laws, Alexa, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, when I first got elected here, seems a lot longer than 4 years ago, this report would end up being on the table. It'd be received and it was been ignored until the next one came. And so I have some degree of sympathy with your view, Kate, that just receiving it is not really an adequate answer, and it's been inadequate for the last 4 years. So why would we try and be anything other than adequate now? So let's do something different. The State of Environment report is basically just the first part of a 3-part journey, and we keep losing it at the first part, which is what's the story and what's happening. We don't get to what's causing this, which is sort of the obvious second question, but we never ask that question. And then we certainly don't get to the third question, which was, and how are we going to make it better? That's the simple journey. What's the story? What's causing it? How can we make it better? So when we do these state of environment reports, it seems to me that it's got to be as part of that function, that tripartite function. Is the reason that we do this, like this, that we are fulfilling some statutory obligation, but does that preclude us from being a bit more inventive and creative and actually putting 2 and 3 together as well? Because it seems that you're really, can I just expand that by saying, because if you're going to keep on doing this, we're just going to keep on going round in circles.
Julie.
Can I please add a few things?
Sorry,
Anita, do you want to go?
Yeah, Councillor Laws, questions 2 and 3 are exactly the planning process that we're in right now. So that's what giving effect to the MPSFM is asking us to do. So we take this piece of information and we build a picture so that we can answer 2 and 3. So that's what we're doing now. That's the I think part of what Gretchen was referring, Councillor Robertson, in the broader work program. So we are asking and answering questions 2 and 3, and you'll see those coming through FMU by FMU as we move through the region.
Do we want to do it that way, or do we want to do it more holistically? Because, I mean, why would I want to look at, for example, suspended fine sediment as just relating to, for example, the Dunstan Rohe? Wouldn't I want to say, well, what's causing that as a general problem throughout our region?
So
can I please?
Oh, do you want to go? I was just going to say there's different reasons for it, Councillor Laws.
I know exactly. Yeah.
So in the Upper Lakes, there's things that called, and this is a science answer, so apologies, Rachel and Julie, for oversimplifying, glacial flour that we have no control over. And then there are other FMUs or rohe where the cause of the suspended settlement might be something that we can have control over. So part of answering those questions is where can and should we intervene, and where can we say this is a naturally occurring process, and the MPS says if it's a naturally occurring process, then you don't need to intervene. So there's a first layer of question and answer that we need to ask in that.
That's exactly the point that I'm making. Thank you. Because, and again, it'll state with E. coli as well. There'll be issues here that it's caused by ducks crapping. Sorry, no control over that. Or it could be the Freedom Camper decided to, in actual fact, toilet themselves there. Or it could be that there's a systemic problem from dairy cattle. So, and the problem, Brian, when you read this thing, is we don't know. And that's where I'm coming from. The State of Environment report doesn't give us enough information to be able to make then considered policy responses.
No, but it provides us with the robust knowledge base from which we can. And so there's been a real need and a want for some really good science evidence-based decision making. Absolutely. So this is part of that. This forms the foundation from which good decision making can then be made. And now we are required to, under the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, to do that, to identify those issues and come up with non-regulatory and regulatory ways to address and remediate those issues, and report back on our progress to improve the environment that we live in. So that's all coming down to us now through national direction.
No, but can I go back though? Sorry, E. coli is a brilliant example.
Yeah.
We take we say, right, we failed that, got a D, bang. But I don't know, and at the moment we don't, if there's a real problem there, or it is caused by just, for example, the issues that I have detailed.
Can I?
And I guess that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
So, Michael, can I just attempt to answer that? So, what we're looking at with this, what we're terming action planning, I guess, is. Don't forget, this is not the only piece of information we have, right? This is just water quality. So I think what you're coming at is you need to have a more holistic picture of all the pieces of the puzzle to understand it. That process will come through developing a plan for remediating, right? So we would take the water quality information, and we might take the groundwater, like we had a report a few weeks ago on the groundwater, and we would take all these pieces of information and we would look at it and decide what is the plan of attack in terms of that particular catchment. That's what we're talking about when we're saying we need to be able to prioritise areas of action, to take action and develop up action plans which we can then implement. So I think that you're sort of talking about a step 2 of the process, as you refer to it, in terms of getting all the information on the table, clearly understanding what the problem is, not just what the data is, but what the problem is, developing up a plan around it, and then implementing the plan.
Yeah, I guess I'm more keen on getting that second question of what's the actual problem? What's causing this reading? Because it might be something that we do need to get involved in. And as you've given a good example, I think it might be just something that, you gave the good example. You just ignore it. It's natural.
Which is, I think, to Gretchen's point, it's actually quite a large piece of work to do this across all sites, across all of Otago, where it is.
Can you give me some timing around how you'd see this happening?
Well, I guess the first step we need to do is the piece we're talking about to do by the middle of the year, which is we need to be able to clear on how we as an organisation want to prioritise and the tool we choose to how we prioritise. And once we've got an idea of that prioritisation, we can run through all the sites through it and we'll get effectively a huge list of, hopefully it's not too large, but it will be quite long, list of areas where we might want to put into plan interventions. It's only at that point that we can actually really got a grasp of how long the list is, and therefore we might be able to think about how long it might take to go through. But we have, it's not going to be fixed by the end of the year. No.
Okay, thank you. Alexa.
Okay, I just want to go back to where I've said hold a workshop to further discuss this report. I'd like to expand on that given our discussions, and I think that we don't so much need a workshop on the actual report. It needs to be more about what we do with data and how we remedy issues. And I think one of the main reasons for including it in this resolution, why I really want it there, is because people are going to be watching this. A lot of people, they need to know what we're going to do next. So I wonder if we add something like, and I've written this, acknowledge that the baseline of our water quality, acknowledge the gaps in knowledge, look for land use data and other data, for example, high flow testing, citizen science, to further inform the SOE and to design a work program or see a work program coming back that will reflect the urgency of improving water quality across all of Otago's water in line with Te Mana or Te Wai. So it's just to really indicate to people we are doing something. There's an agenda item going to come back. We're going to workshop stuff. And and on top of that, I just don't want to see us paralysed by not having enough information. We need to just keep moving.
Sarah, you're going to make some comments. Are you able just to perhaps give some guidance around what is the best way to take this to the next level, to try and create some clarity about step 2, etc., in light of the existing work program and what we've got planned?
So my concern is that we have a really heavy existing work program already, and what you're asking for will fall out from that, but not right yet. And so what you're actually asking for is, I think, more than we can deliver within the time period. So, if you think of the work program as kind of 3 legs of a stool, right? So we have the SOE monitoring piece that we do. We've also got everything that we're putting into the land and water plan work. And we will gather further information through that process with our conversations with communities about what they know. And then the 3rd leg of the stool is the action planning that we will put together based on priorities. And I guess if you want to think about a 4th leg of the stool, it's the implementation of integrated catchment planning, which is coming in, I think, year 3 of the LTP. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't forget that I know it's frustrating because you see this report and you're wanting the answers, but don't forget there's a whole work program that's going to deliver A, the answers, and B, the action.
Let's acknowledge that then in this resolution, so that people don't think we've just grabbed this, it goes on the shelf again, it's been received. Full stop. That's fair enough.
I just ask a question to that point. So look, I do understand, and that's a great analogy. But can you put in something that we can see as to where what Councillor Forbes is wanting will actually fall out of that?
I can. I mean, we can, but I guess, I can, but my hesitation is around redirecting staff onto doing that when actually you have had all of this information at different times, whether that's been through all of the LTP workshops and conversations that's been had, whether that's been through side conversations that have been had around action planning and how we prioritise, or whatever. So I'm just a little bit hesitant to sort of grow another head of steam on another piece of work.
I don't want us to do that. I don't think that's what Kevin's asking either.
No, I know what he's asking for, which is more like a bit of a one-pager that's kind of sets it out for you so that you can see when these things will happen. They are very interdependent. I think that's the answer. So, we're on a journey that's going to take us into 2023 at the first point at which we notify the land and water plan. That's pretty much where I would see that very first kind of milestone where you get somewhat of a complete picture, but that's about as rough as it is at the moment in terms of the absolute detail of when you might actually have those things falling out. Because remembering the way we're attacking this is FMU by FMU, so the information won't come in all at the same time. And also with the action planning piece, we'll be informed by the state of the environment work, and that will and other work as Gwyneth was talking about, that will let us inform the way we move forward. So,
can I just ask a wee quick question straight off that? Later this afternoon in strategy and planning, we've got 7.2 Arrow and Cadrona FMU plan provisions, and it's talking about water flow as a result of everything we've got. Sorry, that to me is us acting on.
That's it.
Yeah, bit by bit through the different FMUs.
It's just that it's not. I can't come to you in 6 months' time even and give you a big complete picture of everything and have it all nicely lined up. Because the way that we're approaching the work is it's a significant program and an FMU focus over a period of time.
Can we just change that to be council meeting on the 23rd of June?
I was going to go back to my original list, and I had Brian.
Yeah, that being said, Sarah, as Gretchen said, this is our number one thing, water quality. And it seems to me, certainly from where I sit, that we need better clarity about what's actually going on. It just seems to me that, there's a lot of work in a lot of silos. For example, staff are busy doing their bit, governance getting a report from time to time. I had the opportunity yesterday to visit DOC with the Otago Catchment Group community. So, they've appointed some people and they're looking at the catchments holistically, trying to identify which ones got catchment groups and the focus and how good they're doing. We visited DOC, and DOC, Office and Alex, and they're doing a particular focus on the Taieri. So in the Taieri, DOC are doing a push, iwi are doing a push as well. MFE are also doing a push near there. You've got the OCC, we've got staff doing all their stuff, and governance, even though we get reports from time to time, I can vouch we're lacking that clarity on progressing the number one issue. And to me, what it's all about is not about making extra work, but somehow improving that overview, that clarity, and touching base from time to time. So I'm very happy, for example, that Kate has put in there that policy will connect with governance about the prioritisation work that's going on. Can I also ask that one of the other things in this SOE report that it talks about, it says that science is developing a land science program to enable comment on drivers of water quality trends. And I don't want to wait to 2023 to be able to comment on this stuff. I'd like more connection between science and governance and understanding what is actually going on. So my question is, quite simply, or Gwyneth, is when will science touch base with this? Not necessarily not talking about extra work, and I'd love that to be in the resolution so the public can see that we're moving on to policy and science.
So I just want to say, look, this team has been a complete team for a month. All right? We've got to give them time to establish themselves, to get an understanding of the lay of land, to set up their work program. So that's the phase we're in right now. We're trying to do it as fast as we can because we are very aware that we have a land and water plan and we want to be able to influence that as much as possible. So they are out there talking to people, gathering information and building that work program. Just like we brought you the estuary program, just like we're talking about bringing you the groundwater program, when we have something fulsome to come and talk to you about, we will do that. I don't really want to put a date on it right now, only because that team has only been in place for about a month, and I've just got to give them a little bit of time to get the lay of the land before I can maybe in another month's time I can commit to a
well, that would be appreciated, Gwyneth, because until we start working together, we're not going to solve this. We're just diving down different rabbit holes. You know, we need to work together within the ORC and external to the ORC.
Yes,
Thanks,
so they
Brian.
are out talking to people, Brian. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Hillary, and then we're going to wrap it up because it seems to me that there is a clear work program that actually answers all the concerns that we've got, and we're probably a bit impatient and we want it done now. But accepting what the chief has said, the chief executive has said that we've got a full work program. We've taken on additional staff. We've picked up on all these bits of the puzzle that currently aren't in place, but we've got our eye on these bits and we know what we need to get to that stage 2, using Councillor Law's analogy. So I feel that we're nearly there. So Hillary, then Kevin, then Carmen, then Gary, and then we'll wrap it up.
I'd just like to suggest that we take 2 out completely because we don't know where this thing's going in the meantime.
Yep.
And change that first one to say by the council meeting on 23rd of June. So that means it turns up as an action point by then if we haven't got anything before that, and that will direct us to the next part of the puzzle.
Excellent. Kevin?
The thing that I'm actually really excited about is the FMU structure. I think that's going to be the key ingredient that we need for each of our own areas, and for the whole province, and that will give us the understanding. I think and then that's about prioritising. So there is I've looked through every list there. Had a really good coffee with Councillor Scott this morning and helped go over this list and go over his thoughts on it, my thoughts on it, and Councillor Calvert's thoughts on it. Look, there's at least a baddie in every area. So I mean that's my priorities just for a kick-off. But I think we need to go through a process to get to those priorities. But what I'm really concerned about, and I'm gonna need my science to back me up on this one at the end of the day, is we've come in this last 10 years. We're not getting any worse at degradation, but we're actually not improving things. So we're degrading and then we've levelled off. So is that because we are doing some good work, or is that because good luck? And in fact, what we're doing is not actually working, because there is a lot of people out there trying to do a lot of work that probably need some real good direction from us under FMUs and the likes to get things going. And just the other point I'd like to make from Councillor Deaker about the catchment groups, where they're getting their figures and showing good results, and ours, I know they're only points in time and the likes, but should we not be all on that same baseline and be able to make sure we coordinate those? So FMU process, we need to get that really going, because and I'm not asking you to push it further than we're programmed, but I think that's going to be the key, so our communities can start seeing that our science team's doing the work, everyone's doing the work, and we're going in the right direction, and we can support Mr. Robson, so that we actually do care and we want to take proactive measures to get things going. So that's what he's after.
Thank you, Carmen, and then Gary.
I was just going to attempt to answer the questions. So I think it's probably fair to say that we're not haven't necessarily been all that good evaluating the effectiveness of what we put in place in the past. So it's definitely something we're looking at both in terms of the land and water plan that we're putting in place, making sure we're really clear about thinking about evaluation up front and evaluating the effectiveness of what we put in place. It is also something we're looking at in terms of thinking about how we deliver these action plans. It's embedding it as part of the planning process to actually have an evaluation component, so that when we set out a plan and we put out an objective and outcome that we're after with that plan, that we build that evaluation piece into it. So it's definitely something we're conscious of about. And I can't remember what the second question was.
That's brilliant. That would have been
okay.
Well done. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you. Mine's different. It's really to do with the water sampling. So am I correct? You said analysis is not done in-house, as in not done by OSC, but the data is done in-house by OSC. Have I got that correct?
All the analysis this time was done by LWP.
So that's a statistical analysis.
Yeah.
Yes, the data analysis.
So,
yes.
Yeah, so OSC staff collect the samples, goes to a laboratory for analysis, and then actually the results were analysed by LWP.
Is that normal? You know, look, it's a normal SOE monitoring. That's just how it works. You do one part, somebody else does another.
This time round only have we asked an external provider to do the statistical analysis.
Okay. And may I ask, in the future, will you do it like that?
I don't know. It seemed very good idea to do it that way because they are the experts and because OSC knew that this piece of work would be scrutinised.
And also may I add that the data, there's gaps in the data. It's not the easiest data set to analyse because of sites have been stopped and started and all those sorts of things, right? So to do a really robust, effective trends analysis, it's fraught with many challenges, and so we thought we'd go to the experts in this case, and they will help us with analyses in the future. Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you. That does clear up a lot of things that I think that we have probably not quite understood, and thank you for that.
Cool. Gary.
Yeah, I'm listening to everyone's discussion, and of course it's really concerning for me what's actually in the report, and the commentary almost leaning towards the reasons is more concerning. It worries me more that we've gone out of the team for that direction as opposed to within the team, because if I was the leader of a catchment group at the moment, doing good work, collecting my sampling, rallying my people, this report would be a total kick in the teeth to me. And if I was leading, say, Thompson's Creek, for example, you know, this report says that poor water quality in Thompson's Creek is likely to replicate it across all creeks in the Dunstan Mountains. I mean, what evidence is there to support that? You know, it says that we are going to lead, this is going to inform a land plan, and we don't have any land details, but then the report claims that in the Cadrona, the increases in NNN but are nothing. The report knows nothing about land use practices, but it's able to make that direction on the Cadrona. So right the way through, there are inaccuracies. It highlights that we must do a land plan, but it's not looking at the other naturally occurring situations. It just highlights them as red. So I view it as, well, it's an overall very vague snapshot. Like LAWA, I'm losing faith in state environment monitoring, and I'm losing faith in LAWA. Because we as a council and our science team need to drill down more into each of these areas and come up with the facts and data that might match what those catchment groups are actually doing themselves. Otherwise, as Anita has highlighted, council, and she seems almost delighted in a way to be aiming towards a land plan based on this type of detail. And if that's the case, we're going to be totally at odds with those catchment groups who are out there doing good work on their own behalf. So it really concerns me.
Yeah. Any comments about the discrepancies?
It's off at the moment. When it's got a red light, it's on.
Thank you. I think
it's off. You have to put it on, Rachel.
That's right.
Yeah. Perfect.
So catchment groups are doing great work. Their monitoring hasn't been going for 10 or 20 years on the whole. Particularly at the same site with the same analytes. So that's the difference between catchment group monitoring and state of environment monitoring that Regional Council has done well for the last 20 years. And the other thing I'd say is that we have in the past done an awful lot of catchment work. So where in the report comments have been made, it's due to past catchment programmes, and those reports are available on the council website. So, for example, Thompson's Creek, we had a large catchment program going there for 2 years, so we know about water quality there, and the same with the Cadrona. But the main point is catchment groups are doing a good job, and they know the intricacies of the catchment. Otago Regional Council is limited usually to one spot in the catchment, which is near the bottom of the catchment.
Thank you, Rachel. No further discussion?
Well, just to make the point, as Julie said, this SOE data is our foundation data. You know, like it's been scientifically assessed in some independent work, and Gary has sort of cast a view upon it. And I challenge that actually, because this is our foundation. It's said there's issues, been quite specific about it. It hasn't been able to explain why they're necessarily there, for example, E. coli and so forth. But nevertheless, these are facts, scientific facts.
Yep, this is an overall snapshot, state of play, where the trends are heading. Exactly, it is high level, and we are wanting to see more action in terms of outcomes. And like I said before, we are impatient with regards to ensuring that we're seen to actually making a difference. And we're not there yet, but we're on a journey, and by the sound of it, we've got all the pieces in the puzzle coming together, and we will get there. Two recommendations, a mover and a seconder. Carmen, seconded Hillary. No further discussion. We've had a good crack at this. Thank you very much for your contribution. I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against, carried. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Anita. Moving on to the resolution to exclude the public. I'll move from the chair, seconded Carmen. It's the same resolution we moved earlier today. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.